Why is there a hair on that? I shed. Books. I read 8 books in April. Let's get into it. First, we have Wildfire in the Grove by Esmeralda Sultan, independent author. If you really like Game of Thrones, this one is heavily inspired by Game of Thrones, but it's a little bit more of like a romantasy, typically follows like the Sarah J. Maas formula. But here's this. They bathe. Some points that the pacing wasn't my favorite, like it was slow and then it would be fast and then it would be slow again, but I enjoyed the dialogue. I think the beginning 1/3 was like the slowest part, but then it really picks up and it ended very nicely. April was also a big John Gwynne month. I read Malice, which is book 1 in the Faithful and the Fallen series. And then I also read The Shadow of the Gods and The Hunger of the Gods, which is books 1 and 2 in the Bloodsworn trilogy. I have Hunger of the Gods because I borrowed it from the library. Libraries are great. Support your library. But I read this series first, and I'm really glad that I did because I personally think it's better written than this one. Pretty sure that if I read this one first, I would have written John Gwynne off as like an author whose writing that I didn't like and probably would never have picked up this one. But because I picked up this one and this one was really, really good, I read this one while waiting for book 2 of this series from my library to be available. Anyway, so let's start off with the positives of The Shadow of the Gods. So John Gwynne, if you don't know, he likes to write multiple points of view and then weave all the plot points together into one big plot. Both The Shadow of the Gods and The Hunger of the Gods, and I haven't read book 3 yet, but I plan to, of the Bloodsworn trilogy is a Norse-inspired epic fantasy, and it is fan-freaking-tastic. This is phenomenal. This series is so good. I'm assuming I haven't read book 3, but books 1 and 2 are great, so I can only imagine book 3 is also going to be awesome. What's really cool is typically with male authors in the fantasy genre, women are kind of weak, but that's not the case in this one. Women are total badasses. They are leaders, they are warriors, they are also caring mothers, so it's getting the multi-dimensionalness of women that I thought was awesome. The fight scenes are insane. This is good. I highly recommend this one. Okay, now moving back to Malice. I am not sure that I'm gonna continue this series. I might, but it took about this much. This much of this was all like info dump. And so it follows the storyline of 4 different characters, but there were a whole bunch of these secondary characters that kept getting mentioned. And then it was really hard for me to follow along where the story was going. Like I got so confused. Like there's so many people, like who's who, and the names are so similar. This one was difficult, but the last like 50 pages or so, like this chunk right here, really got good to the point where I was like gasping and going, no. So I might finish it because it got amazing. So this series came out before this one, and it makes sense because writers only get better the more that they write. I might continue this series. Oh yeah, and this is like a typical like good versus evil story, I think. Again, this was kind of hard to figure out what was going on. So Hunted by LaBrie James. This was my favorite indie read of April. It was very gritty, very visceral. Why is there a hair on that? I shed. The story revolves around an 18-year-old named Lennox. Wow, tongue twister. Like the very, very first chapter, it just plops you right into like really gruesome assault, schmexual assault. Like read the trigger warnings because this is a thriller and it's intense. There's a stalker who's also a killer who also does human trafficking. Like there's a lot of heavy subjects in there, but the dialogue was really, really good, and this was a true page turner. I think I finished this in like a day, 2 days. Like this was really good. I also read Paradise Lost by John Milton because I figured if I'm gonna be reading a bunch, I might as well try to read smart books. So I recommend reading it, but I hated it. So why would I recommend something that I hated? It's very, very culturally significant and very thought-provoking, especially theologically, because it discusses like the fall of Adam and Eve, but it brings in all of these really poignant thoughts, such as God having created other worlds and there are other Adams and Eves. It like broadens the scope of Christianity, I think. I could talk a lot about Paradise Lost. There's a lot to unpack, but it's so misogynistic. I honestly think this would be Andrew Tate's anthem, is Paradise Lost. So if you're Christian or if you're familiar with Christianity, Satan is big bad guy, right? Not once in the entire poem was Satan ever described as evil. There was like a lot of sympathy for Satan, which was interesting and also a theological point that a lot of people discuss nowadays. The ultimate villain of this poem was Eve. Take that as you will. So, hated it, but you should read it. I also read Jury of Peers by Troy Brodsky. This is another independent author. A man witnesses the brutal murders of both his pregnant wife and his young 8-year-old daughter, and he takes justice into his own hands by kidnapping the people who did it and filming a trial. And it's very visceral, like the imagery is kind of insane, and I think it's very impressive how the author knows a lot about computers and how like hacking and all that. I don't know. They know how stuff works. I don't know how stuff works. I just read. But anyway, it was very compelling. It was a bit jaunty, trying to connect thoughts at some points, and the dialogue was a little bit hit or miss, especially between the cops, in my opinion. But I think you should guys, wow, English. But I think you guys should give it a try. We support indie authors. Then finally, I read The Mostly True Story of Tanner and Louise, and this was such a cute book. It revolves around an octogenarian and a 21-year-old roommate of this octogenarian, and they're running away from
the law.
I would label this as like a cozy mystery. All like super positive. It's a very positive, cozy mystery. And I just love books about octogenarians doing anything outside of what you would think a typical octogenarian would do. Like anything involving like crime. I think it's funny and cute. So I miscounted. I read 9 books. The other book I read was Dark Age. I can't believe that I forgot that I read Dark Age because it's such an amazing book. It's book number 5 in the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. I can't recommend the Red Rising series enough. It is so good. There are so many twists, and the character dynamics and the relationships, everything is amazing. It is so gripping, so chilling at points, and incredibly heartbreaking. The series has a chokehold on my life. Dark Age is dark, as the title suggests. If you see, it starts off, if you've read the first book of Red Rising, it just continues to get more bleak as it goes on. And Pierce Brown literally, he holds nothing back in showcasing how awful war is, even if it's in space. War is a terrible thing. The descriptions are intense. And if you're sensitive to those sort of things, I don't read it. Read Tanner and Louise, because that one's cozy. So that's it. That's what I read for April. If any of you guys are interested in these titles, there is links to the books below. You could also support your local libraries by seeing if they have them in stock. And I am currently reading Discovering the Reaper by, who is it? Hold on, let me go get it. By Bethany Frost. And look at the pages are like black with white lettering. Woo! Don't want to lose my place. Another independent author, if you guys want to read along with me. We'll see you at the end of the month for a wrap on what I read this month. Happy reading.